You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Welcome to Lighthouse Conversations, everybody. I love that the universe has brought you here to this moment to listen to this conversation. I'm really thrilled to introduce you to Dominic. So he is a new friend, met him at this fun cocktail party, and I just got very deep, very quickly into spirituality. It's been an interesting process as I've been transitioning into having a spiritual wellness company and talking to people about my book, The ABCs of Awakening, talking to them about this podcast, about the retreats that I held and will hold in the future. And every time I do it, it gets easier and easier. So it was especially delightful to talk to Dominic about this and know that his background is one where he came from athletics. He was not necessarily surrounded by spirituality, but through that process, he found it, and he found some incredible mentors to help show him the way, and he is living a really beautiful, light-filled life right now. So I hope you enjoy getting to know Dominic a little bit better. Dominic, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How you doing?
I'm doing amazing. I'm really thrilled that you're on the show. Since I first met you at this really fun cocktail event, I really had no idea that what we'd end up chatting about would be so deep and so spiritual. And I was just really blown away by the understanding that you have of life, of your spirituality. It was not necessarily a track that you purposefully knew you were going on, but you ended up there just by being present and being aware. So can you tell the listeners at home a little bit about your journey from being even on the NFL track to being an entrepreneur to just being an all-around light in your life and community?
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. And, it's not very often you get to, communicate with somebody, in this life that is on the same wavelength as you and is on the same vibration. And, out of all the people that I had conversations with at the time we met, you were the only person that I actually got to sit down and have a real good conversation with because it was meaningful, right? Most of the time you have conversations with people, it's a lot of small talk. But when we first connected, it was really deep, meaningful, spiritual, how to become a better human, like conversations that really want to take you to another level. So I think that was like one of the things that really like gravitated towards each other in our conversation. So I'm just so thankful that I'm able to have this opportunity to sit here and be able to talk with you about, my journey and where I came from. So I just like from there, I'll jump in.
Perfect.
I was born in Colorado Springs. My entire life, I grew up around modeling my parents, like most of us do. I grew up in a trailer, and I saw a perspective of life where there wasn't a whole lot of abundance or opportunity. My mom didn't really work. She grew up eating out of trash cans, living out of school buses. She was very poor, impoverished. My dad really didn't have a father figure in his life, so he did the best that he could to provide, but that's all he knew was providing. So I grew up in an environment of growing up in a trailer, super poor, food stamps, welfare, like the whole deal. But I knew from a young age, like the only thing that I really cared about was I wanted to play in the NFL. Like the NFL was like my number one goal, my number one dream. And like, that's all I worked towards every single day of my life. So I still remember from the age of 2 years old, I'd wake up, watch ESPN with my dad. We'd watch football. I would do push-ups there. And, I would tell him like, hey, like, not just at the age of 2, but going on like, hey, I'm going to play in the NFL one day. And he was my number one supporter, like regardless of whatever I went through with my family, he supported me day in and day out. He took me to all my practices, threw catch with me. And I was forever grateful for that opportunity that I had with my father. that allowed me to pursue that. As I went on, I was very successful when it came to sports. In high school, I was the star of the high school team. I actually, you talk to a lot of people from high school, they would say that I was that individual that was super cocky and arrogant. And, people didn't really enjoy conversating with me too much because they felt like I was just a typical high school jock. And in my mind, I kind of had blinders on, tunnel vision, that I really didn't see that. I was so focused on football and so focused on myself that I never really opened up to the empathy of other people and how I made them feel.
Yeah.
So I kind of just went through this journey of like, it's all about me. It's all about me. And then when I got to college, I went to the University of Wyoming, got the Division I scholarship to go play there. When I got there, I was in for a rude awakening. It was the very, very first time where I had a true awakening in my life. And, after reading your book, A stands for awakening. And it just brought me back to a place where I really had a visualization of that awakening that I had. So my freshman year in college, I went through this journey of being away from home, going to a new city, having no family around me, no car. The weather was awful, it was super cold. And at the same time, I didn't have a car, I lived in the dorms, just adjusting. I was a 17-year-old kid. I just stepped on the campus trying to figure it out. And I had the weight of the world on my shoulders because everybody around me from the outside thought I had everything. They were like, you have the Division I scholarship, you had good grades, you had a significant other that was there by your side. You had everything. And as a true freshman, I started. So for a true freshman to walk on the campus and start as a true freshman at Division I level, it's really unheard of in a lot of cases. Typically they redshirt, which means they sit out a year and then they come back the next year and they play. But for me, I just stepped on day one and I started starting. So, I had so much pressure from the coaches, the outside world, people telling me like, you're going to be great. And then some people on the other side saying you're not going to account to anything. And it was just, this constant battle of a 17, 18-year-old kid that was really just trying to figure it out. And during that time, I was the most depressed, loneliest that I've ever felt in my entire life. And I'm not going to say that I really felt like I was going to commit suicide, but I had thoughts of a point in my life where I was like, what is this life? What's the meaning of this life anymore? I don't even really know why I'm here. I'm not enjoying myself. I hate my life. I woke up every day depressed and was like, I don't know, this really isn't for me anymore. I thought about quitting football and just leaving and just doing the whole gambit. I ended up pushing through it and I ended up coming across a mentor along the way. He kind of showed me, his path that he went on. And, I had a couple coaches by my side that showed me a little bit of guidance too. And, they introduced me to my first real experience with God. And when I really found my relationship with God, and for me, everybody's relationship with their God is going to be different, like you mentioned in your book, right? And for me, my God was Jesus Christ. And when I had that relationship and I created that relationship, my whole life changed. And that was the first real awakening of opening my eyes to a whole new world that I was no longer, that I wasn't aware to at the time. So instead of being super depressed and and super down and this world sucks, I had a whole new vision for life. All right, I'm here for a purpose, P for purpose in your book.
That's right.
There's, hey, amen to it, right? And I realized there was so much more to this life than what I was chasing. I was chasing the fame, the dream of playing in the NFL. I was chasing, money. I was chasing all of these things, I was chasing people's acceptance. It wasn't just about, me accepting myself for who I am. It was I needed acceptance from everybody else. And once I created that relationship with God, God started teaching me about who he was, who I was, where I wanted to go. And, I started learning all of these lessons. And I would say that's probably the biggest awakening, that I had spiritually was that moment when I was 18, 17-year-old kid. And that really transformed, the rest of my life going forward. And, like you said, I've had other opportunities to, play in the NFL and be an entrepreneur. And, there's a whole gamut of things that led, going forward of other awakenings. But I would say, first and foremost, like that was the true awakening of my entire life that set up the foundation for who I am today. So
it's an incredible story. And, not everybody sees an opportunity like that, has the mentor, and really goes with it, takes it to heart. We are presented with so many options in our lives, and you stepped into it. And what we've talked about before is that you don't just step into it once and you're like, I'm in, hooray, I did it, I'm
mm-hmm.
awake, I'm so spiritual right now. No, you have to keep choosing it, and life is going to keep throwing things at you in different ways. I mean, you went over this major hurdle and found yourself in a really big way. But it seems like scary to think that that's not it. We're not done. But it's also our opportunity to expand. And what I think I'm realizing is that every time it hurts like that, because to be honest, like I'm going through something like that right now. I'm going through another little awakening right now. And I'm like, why is this hurting so much? I don't understand, when things seem to be flowing really well, all of a sudden I'm at this brick wall, and I'm realizing it's an invitation to expand. It gets that uncomfortable because we're outgrowing, like our vessel, our soul is outgrowing the container that we've created it for it so far. And so I see in your life, you keep saying yes to those invitations, and I admire that so much. And I also admire how you bring your work in football to children. So you're teaching them by example, not only, in the sport itself, but how to be a man, how to be a spiritual person without like saying, I'm sure, like, hey guys, hey kids, here's a spiritual lesson for today. But just the way you show up in their lives, that must be very powerful for you.
Yeah, kids in general are probably one of the biggest, blessings that I feel like that have ever walked across this planet, because they're going to be the ones who ultimately create a foundation for, the rest of the world and, future generations to come. But at the same time, they are so pure, they're so innocent that, how they're shaped is going to essentially create their future going forward. There's based off of science, Dr. Lipton, talks about it. Bruce Lipton talks about it a lot, is between the ages of 0 to 7, you're in that alpha stage where you're taking in so much information in your subconscious. And when your subconscious takes in information from your parents, just from visualizing them, seeing what they're doing, with their money, the way they act around each other, what they teach you, the things that they tell you, they say you're not good enough. They say, you don't deserve that. Those things, you don't really understand it between the ages of 0 to 7, but those things are coming into your subconscious, which should then create patterns and habits that you then develop for the rest of your life. So for me, it's so important that, we feed back into, kids, and we teach them valuable lessons, and that we are mentors, and that we're there for them and show them love and show them value, and, can just cultivate them into the human beings that they've been created to be by God, so they can have their own spiritual journey to, be happy, right? I think that's the number one thing that people really need to consider in this world is are you happy, right? If you're not happy, something is wrong. And I think a lot of that comes and stems back to kids when they're growing up. They see their parents aren't happy. If you see your parents aren't happy, then therefore you don't know what happiness is, and you're not going to be happy. And there's so many things that go into it. So if you can be a mentor, you can be a light, then, the circle of light. Like, I think it's one of the most important things, like for a person to be able to live by. So, like I think kids are super important, and for us to feed into their lives is a very, very crucial thing for every human being.
I am with you. And, you bringing up the circle of light, like, I feel like our world would be a lot more childlike if we all operated that way. For those of you who haven't read the book yet, it's this concept that makes sense to me. And this is how I explain it, is that there's a thing in your heart that you love that feeds you. For you, it might be football, it might be, there's many things that light you up, but there's that thing. For me, it's theater, or it's helping people, it's coaching. I have so much inside me that I love to do. So when you have that in your heart, and then it comes back around, and it's the point where what you love to do most meets where how you can best serve the world. So that's like your highest way you can possibly serve the world. And then that comes back to you when you see the impact of it. You see it in the child's face. You see it when they fall in love with the sport. You see it when they're like, I believe in myself. Like, that comes back, and it gives you that fuel to kind of keep going, and you love it anyway. So it's like you're in this perfect alignment. And I rarely see people in life really living in that space. When I do, I just celebrate it, and I'm just so excited to see it. And I know there's points in my life where that's happened, and I feel like I'm
on the path to that happening more and more consistently. But it's really important to find that thing, like, what do you love and how can you best help? And so it sounds like you're definitely in that space right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, even going back onto, what I was just saying is, the things that make me the happiest is when I'm giving back to those kids and I feel like that's where I'm really in my circle of light is when I'm
Yeah.
giving back and, making an impact and having purpose. And, all throughout college when I was going through, my first awakening, after I had it, I really jumped into that and I started doing things like Big Brother, Big Sister program. I mentored
Yes,
a kid from
they're
like the
so
age of
great.
9 all the way to the age of 15.
That's
Him and I still
amazing.
keep in contact every once in a while. I would travel around, the state of Wyoming and I would speak to kids and I'd pour into them, give my story, give my testimony. I would go to FCA camps, which was Fellowship for Christian Athletes, and I would be like huddle leaders there. So, be mentors to them, teach them about the game of football, teach them how to be a better man, be a better human, while implementing what they learned from their faith and their spirituality and bring it into the game of football. I've had a couple opportunities where I went to Haiti around that same time. I went to Haiti twice. It was about the
Wow.
time when they had the earthquakes.
Yeah.
We went down there for a mission trip to where we got to visit the orphanage, and the orphanage really touched my heart tremendously because when you walk into the orphanage, some of these kids have never been held before in their entire lives. So all they want to do is hold your hand,
Wow.
like be picked up, and
Yeah.
they just gravitate towards you and like they just want to be loved. Like that's like their number one thing, right? So like for me, one day, like I think I want to adopt in that area because it really like tugged at my heartstrings, just knowing that there are kids that deserve a second chance or even a chance to be loved and be mentored by somebody. So when I was out there too, I got to clear off an entire field full of rocks so the kids can jump on the field and play soccer. They
Amazing.
couldn't play originally because they have no shoes, and because they
Right.
have no shoes and the rocks are filled with on the dirt, their feet would get scraped up. So we just did a bunch of things like that when we were there, and it just touched my heart. And you think when you're going there, you're going to be the one that's serving, but when you leave there and you're able to reflect, you're like, wow, like I actually was the one that got served for the entire trip. Like they really touched me more than I probably touched them, more than they could probably even ever imagine. And the crazy part about it is, and I came back, you got to see prospectively how the world is seen. And there's so many people who have everything, they have money, they have shoes, they have a roof over their head, but they're just like not happy with their life. They've never jumped into that circle of light. Like they don't have like a true awakening yet in their life. But some of these people that are in Haiti, like they have nothing, right? It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. They probably make like, I don't know how much they make, but when I was there, I sold a painting to a family and sold it for $30. And I was told that $30 painting would feed their family for 4 months. So it just shows like the very little amount of money that they had. But with that being said, they were some of the happiest people like I've ever met in my entire life, just full of joy, full of smiles, full of light. And it just like put things in perspective for me. Like,
Yes.
why are these people so happy with nothing? But then you come back home and people have everything but are unhappy. So it was just a true blessing to be able to like see perspective and see different parts of the world and be able to pour back into kids and just experience that.
And that definitely fills your cup back up because there's something about service. There's something about giving of yourself that truly is the best thing we could do for ourselves. And I feel like there's an endless amount of people who are going to need help. There will always be somebody who needs the love that you have, the kindness that you have, and there's no shortage of opportunities to do so. So it's just a matter of finding that thing that you really connect with, and it sounds like kids are a big part of that. So I'm curious, when you were a kid, was there ever like any indication that there was something more than what you were seeing around you, like spiritual wise? Were you ever like, did any big questions come to mind, or did you ever look out at the night sky and you're like, what's going on out there? I just wonder, because these are concepts like that were introduced to you a little bit later in life, but was there ever an indication when you were younger that there might be something more?
It's crazy that you asked that question because I've never really actually contemplated and sat back and thought about that. But now that I'm actually, thinking about it now, like I really don't think so. My mom, she had a relationship where she knew of a God. My dad was like a complete atheist where he, didn't believe in any type of spirituality. Like now it's completely different. My dad has a complete relationship with, his creator, and my mom has a relationship too. So it's completely different now for them. But at the time, like I was just in my own world. Like as a kid, like, I enjoyed my childhood, right? I got to, you know, be outside playing the kids
Yeah.
at the trailer park and just be so focused on football. But like I was just so locked in with what I was doing with sports that I never really even considered anything else outside of even football. Like it's so crazy to think about. Like I grew up in Colorado, and everybody here, like they, hike, ski, snowboard, like they do all these cool things. And then they're like, hey, have you ever done that? I'm like, no. I'm like, you grew up in Colorado, you never done any of that stuff? I'm like, no, like I haven't. I've literally been so focused on football and sports my entire life that everything else around me was just a blur.
Was just
Like,
a blur.
just thinking about it, yeah, everything else around me was just so blur because I was so locked in and focused on this one thing. So
I will say, though, I spent most of my life in Colorado. I moved here when I was 9, and I do not ski or snowboard because, like, I'm a dancer and I really don't want to hurt myself. And I don't enjoy it enough to make it worth the risk. But I will après ski. I will get a massage and I will après ski all day. But what I would say is that, you playing outside with the kiddos, that is a form of, I think it's like a form of prayer, oddly enough, because you're connecting with other people, you're connecting with nature, you're being outdoors, you're being active, you're using your body for what it's meant to be, something healthy, moving around. You're learning how to interact as a team. You're learning how to look out for each other and also how to protect yourself and defend yourself. There's so much to gain from that. There's so much wisdom in that you don't necessarily have to put a name to it. Like, this is a spiritual experience. It kind of just was, in my opinion. And you got the benefit of that by being, the beauty of being so focused on something. When your attention is on it and you're in the moment, like that, to me, is almost a form of prayer too.
Yeah. No, that's great. I never even thought about that. I mean, and going back to the whole subconscious thing of it, right? You saying that, hanging out with kids and being in the nature, like all of those were experiences that were like cultivating into my subconscious that probably helped cultivate me to who I was today. And I didn't even realize it, which is incredible to, think about. And I've never, ever thought about that. So that's like a piece of me that I can like look at now and be like, wow, like that's incredible.
Wow.
So thank you for that.
You got it. I mean, it built a really great foundation for you, set you on the right path and gave you this, knowledge and wisdom that you were able to cultivate throughout your life. I'm curious about like being the higher and higher up level you got in football, what you saw that was really positive and what you saw that was challenging to who you felt you were as a person. Like if you were in alignment, would the career in football be something that was also in alignment with you, or was it something that brought you to a different place where you looked at it differently, whereas you thought it was always for you before?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the answer to that is I would have to say it's always tough to say because when you were growing up and from the age of 2, you're so focused on one thing your entire life, you think that's your path. Like you think that is you. Like you think that is your number one path no matter what, right? You think that is your alignment. You think that is your purpose.
That's right.
But as the higher I went and the higher I got, I started to realize that it wasn't like alignment with who I was. And a lot of it had to do with because I do not think that I was, spiritually mature enough yet with who I was, with my walk in that path to be able to handle the things that potentially could have came from it. When you get to that level and you experience that type of fame, that type of money, that type of wealth, the, women that are in that realm, the extra temptations that come with it, a lot of those things can consume a person. And if a person can get consumed by that, it's completely off of who they are in alignment of who they need to be as a person. And I think if I would have even made it to like higher and longer, like some of that stuff potentially could have been a consumption of who I, didn't want to be. So I honestly think that my alignment worked out perfectly by God saying, hey, like, this isn't for you. Like I have bigger and better plans for you. I'm going to push you in this direction. At this current moment, you might not feel like it is what is right for you. You might not like it, but I know what's best for you, and here's where you're going to go. So just listen to me, be thankful, be grateful, and understand that down the road, with this setback, quote unquote setback, there'll be bigger blessings if you just be patient.
And just the process again. I mean, it's a huge awakening of having to step away from the identity that you always identified with. You're like, if I'm not this, who am I? And that is a scary free fall to fall into sometimes. It can be so disorienting. It can cause major depression. It can cause acting out and, having these unhealthy behaviors because suddenly you're spinning and you don't know where to go or how to find your center of gravity again because you're not there. And I'm just speaking from myself, but I imagine maybe you also had a similar experience because the only you that is you is your soul. It's your heart. It's what you came in with and your soul is what you're going to leave with. Your body, your identity, your accomplishments, your money, those things don't go with you. Who are you at your core? And sometimes I feel like life takes these things away from us so that we can remember that. And as much as our ego goes, come on, like, this is really hard. Why am I having to deal with this? Yeah. It's really for our soul's growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you couldn't have said it any better. And I went through some of those same things that you experienced. When I had to walk away from football and I realized like football was no longer in my deck of cards, I went through that phase of complete depression. I had another one of those awakenings where I was like, now what do I do with my life? Like I've spent literally 20 plus years focusing on one thing where, I've sacrificed so much of who I am to get to where I'm at. And now it's no longer who I am. Like I have to now start over from the beginning. Like, who's my identity? Where am I? Right. And I think that's dangerous when people put their identity into one thing, especially, an activity. They put all of their eggs in one basket of their identity of who they are, because at any point in time, that identity can get stripped away from you. And if that identity gets stripped away from you, then you're no longer who you are. And now you have to, figure it out.
Yeah.
And, when I was done through my awakening and I was trying to figure out, okay, like, how do I help other people get through their struggles of getting rid of football and trying to transition to something new? I was trying to think of ways to where I could, help people, walk them through it to where they would no longer have to experience the pain. But the more that I'm starting to realize it and look back on it, I think every single person has to go through pain, have to experience that struggle to completely find out who they are. Because when you go through that pain, you start to reflect, and the quote, pain plus reflection equals growth. And so, you have to have the pain plus reflection. And when you can reflect on that pain, then you become, through your growth, you can become, who you were meant to be, and you have that full awakening, and, you can really enter into that circle of light.
Yeah, I really needed to hear you say that for me too. So like, this is a conversation that's really helping me out a lot as well right now. So thank you for that very wise perspective on it. I wanted to ask you, as you were going through all of this, like you mentioned, a few quotes of people that you love. Are there any books that really made this process bearable for you? Were there any movies or songs or podcasts, things that you listened to that were inspiring to you, that gave you some great insight and helped you along your way?
Well, especially with my first, awakening, that was like, all right, here's my new journey with this spiritual being and my creator and my God, right?
Yep.
So some of the things that helped me the most was just listening to, like worship music. And listening to, the gospel, like, the church choir singing and just like worshiping to, your creator and things like that. What that helped me get closer to my, my higher creator. Anything that helped me be one with him, allowed me feel like his presence, his warmth, helped me get through it. And I would say, those were probably the core foundation of like that music was what really helped push me through to get to where, I wanted to feel, during those struggling moments. So.
And there's something also about when voices join together, the vibration raises. There's this idea that when you chant something or you sing something that's been sung throughout the years in praise and worship and, this collective energy, not only are you tuning into like the group you're with, you're tuning into anyone who's ever sung it ever. It's like this beautiful raising of vibration and collective, like, connection. It's a really special thing. Music is so transformative in that way. If it has the words you're looking for, or sometimes even if it's just repetition, it puts you in this like trance-like state, almost where your heart just is open to receive, and sometimes some really beautiful messages will come, or emotional shifts will happen that you weren't expecting. And suddenly you're just like falling on the floor. And that's a beautiful thing. It's like, let it come, let it pass. That's what it's intended for.
Yeah. No, see, at the time, like music was like my main focus, and it made me feel all those things that you said. I've actually, honestly, have kind of gotten away from music quite a bit now. It's ironic that that was the one thing to help me get through my awakening, but like now in my current moment of life, like music is probably like the one thing that I don't really, gravitate towards. And it started with a quote. There's two types of people. The successful person chooses education over entertainment, and the unsuccessful person chooses entertainment over education. So for me, every time I have the option of choosing, music or a podcast, I choose a podcast, or music or a book, I choose a book. So I'm always trying to choose education at the current moment of time, just because like I'm trying to grow. And there's nothing against music. Like I think music's fantastic. Like it's a part of life. Like people are, makes them like, helps them manage their stress, helps them get through moments of life. Like it helped me personally. It's just funny because right now in this current moment of life, like music is like the last thing that I actually like listen to, which is ironic.
We all go through different phases. We all have different peaks and valleys, and sometimes this is more where your energy flows. Sometimes this is more where your energy flows. There's nothing wrong with that. You're doing exactly what you feel in alignment with doing. So that's perfect.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What's coming up for you? That's exciting. And, how can people connect with you too?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, I've appreciated this entire conversation, and like questions that you asked, they help me, see myself in a whole different light than, I could possibly, understand on my own. When you could ask me a specific question, and it helps me think about who I am, it really opens like another door in my head. It's like, wow, like I've never thought about that. Like, wow, like that's incredible. Like now I can really sit back and like go meditate and reflect on that moment. Like now I can go back and like understand who I am even more than I, originally thought I was. And it's like a mini like ayahuasca, right? You just start opening doors for yourself, right? By gravitating and having great conversations with people. So for anybody that hasn't read your book, like I highly suggest like they go out and read it. I just finished it and I thought it was great. There's a lot of key principles in there that I feel like can help a lot of people, especially if they're trying to go through an awakening. For sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Of course. But for me, I'm actually about to, my passion is actually, giving back in any way possible, and like human performance, like human optimization to where they can become the best human that they can possibly be. And if that's like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, wealth, health, money, happiness, it doesn't really matter what it is. Like those things are key for me. And like, I get obsessed when it comes to those topics. Like I spend majority of my day, like focusing on those things. If I'm not doing something that has to do with work, like I'm reading, listening, talking to somebody else about those key topics. So I'm actually about to start a podcast myself.
Yay.
In the next like week or two, it's going to be launched, and it's going to be called Mile High Peak Performers. And it's going to be based around anybody that's here in Colorado, that's really focused on personal growth, development, operating at a very high level, either within their wealth, their family, spirituality. It doesn't really matter. That's going to be the focus of the podcast. And, it's exciting for me because, I get to hear a bunch of different people's stories and, introduce myself to new people who are, operating at a high level, and I get to connect with them and hear their stories. So that's to be continued to come.
So exciting.
Right now. Yeah. It's so exciting.
And we'll put the links at the bottom or in the show notes so everyone can find you.
Cool. And when it comes to social media, like honestly, like right now I'm on a social media cleanse. So like I have no Instagram, no Twitter. I don't have a YouTube channel, no Facebook, no nothing at the current moment except LinkedIn. So if you wanted to find me on LinkedIn, we could connect there, which is just Dominic Rufran. That's Rufran. I'm going to get all of those social medias back, but I think it's important that people can, step away from those every once in a while and get a cleanse to feel what it's like without social media.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times it could really change your life by, one, getting away from all the distractions, being, just wanting to connect. And then the comparison syndrome, right? I
Oh,
think too many
yes.
times, like, we go and we find ourselves just comparing our lives to everybody else on social media because people post the most amazing parts of their life on social media. So when you see someone that has this amazing picture, beautiful, the entire works, money, fame, whatever it is, you start comparing yourself like, oh, they're my age, like they have everything. And when you start to do that, you start to become depressed, right? You start to compare yourself in those shoes. And you're like, well, I don't have any of that, so I might not be worthy. I'm not very good. Like
Absolutely.
I'm not deserving, right? So you start to see yourself in a way that you weren't intended to see yourself. Like, you're supposed to see yourself in the way God created you,
Yes.
not the way the rest of the world envisions for you to be, right? You need to envision yourself as like that person that's meant to have all of those things first before you can actually obtain those things. So getting away from social media, can have that opportunity for you to, one, find time, because I think there's a statistic out right now that the average person checks their phone 400 times a day.
Oh my
And
gosh.
they check Instagram 150 times a day. So, and I've seen people do this where they'll open up their app on Instagram and they'll close it, and then they'll kind of like chill for a second, and then they'll open it back up again and expect something new to be there. But there's nothing new there, right?
There's
They're
nothing
like,
new
well, why isn't
there.
there? Right. But we have this like addiction and this pattern of, just automatically going and opening it. So I think a social media cleanse is good for people every once in a while. I think social
Yeah.
media could be a great tool for people to expand and grow as well. But I think it needs to be used in the right context. It needs to be, it needs to be in a way where it's not being detrimental to your overall health, right? Suicide is like one of the highest, it's not the highest it's ever been. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media right now because of the comparison syndrome. But, there's a lot of great things that have came from social media too. So it's a double-edged sword. So like I said, I just think it's important for people to, sometimes take a step back from it and then come back to it. And so me for right now, like, I'm in a stage in my life where I'm taking a step back. I'm slowly and surely about to come back into it. But I'm stay within like the next month or so. So I should have the podcast and everything up here shortly. But right now, if you want to find me, it's on LinkedIn. So.
That's perfect. And I can't wait to hear your podcast. You are a wonderful conversationalist and you have so much to add, to bring to the table. So I'm sure it'll be just a lot of value that you're going to be adding with every episode you do.
Thanks, Shelly. I really appreciate that.
You got it. Well, Dominic, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being on Lighthouse Conversations.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.